As both a player and a GM, I very much enjoy one-on-one D&D sessions. I find they allow for a much stronger connection between player and DM as you build this world together. There are multiple ways to do this. If you're running an entire one-on-one campaign, it should be with someone you know well, because that relationship really helps the game work smoothly, because you're putting that much time into them. It's nice to know they'll enjoy it and that it's going to be worth it. Also, you could do solo sessions in a more lighter vein, where maybe you want to run a sort of one-shot solo session to kind of just play D&D more often, because it's really easy to set up because you only need one player, and it's also more D&D, again, because you don't have to get 5 other people to agree on this one date to play. It's just you and one other person. It makes scheduling incredibly easy. Often an opportunity to just fill it in whenever you're not doing another campaign, or if you aren't at all doing anything else and just having the solo session, you could play even twice a week, which would be incredibly rare often to kind of gather, especially I ran like probably 6 people games often. So it's a lot easier, both scheduling wise and sort of just finding a place for it. But soul sessions don't have to be their own thing either. For example, in a larger campaign with multiple people, maybe as a one-off, the players can go on their own separate quests, sort of as a downtime thing to pursue their own ambitions. Because one thing that you can do in role-playing games that you can't do in video games or other types of games is ambition, pursuing things on your own accord and not according to some kind of story or whatnot. And this, if you really go into it, have this whole solo session, it makes the player feel important, and also downtime, which is very unappreciated, can sort of have its place to really make those ambitions of the players feel worth it. I mean, they deserve a solo session. And also for someone like me, it's more D&D, because if you have 4 players in your campaign and you're doing downtime, it means you get to roll 4 different sessions for 4 people, which is great. Also, you could do solo sessions, again, in the same vein of being part of something bigger, between campaigns if you're using the same characters. Matthew Colville has a great video on downtime where he gives the often that's kind of just what they do. His players often have these soul sessions in between games where they go off and do their own things. Like one time, one character went off and released their god during downtime, and now he's the villain of the next campaign. It's the same sort of thrill of learning each other's backstory as having new information that other players don't know, that is just revealed all of a sudden months later. You can also do it as a sort of prologue to the campaign. This is something I've been dying to try out. Once again, Matthew Colville does it, where they sort of get to enjoy their backstory by living in it. For example, maybe one of the characters was a soldier in a war. Okay, what happened in that war? Let's run a few solo sessions and find out. He's gonna, make new allies, even have enemies that will come into play later, all because you had this solo session set up. With solo sessions, there's no inter-party conflict. If you want to do something, you just do it. Not only is that great as a player, especially one who enjoys being active in the world, or someone who doesn't get enough spotlight because they're not very social on their own, it works for everyone. Or like me, you just like D&D and you want to play more of it, solo sessions are great for that. They're easy to schedule, and once again, the attention's all on you. I mean, I'm already very active in my DM's world, so this is like a kid in the candy store. This is especially great for kind of custom setting, especially if your player is someone like me, because then they really get to explore that setting that you made, and it's sort of like a playtest. You get to test out the custom setting before having it kind of in a full-blown campaign. Oh shoot, I missed out this. I should probably know, what my faction's ambitions are or whatever. It's a way to kind of flesh out the world and also have it be lived in. If after your solo player kind of lives through that campaign setting, your other players can come in and who knows, they might hear about this one adventurer who had previously slayed a dragon somewhere, and that, that's part of your campaign setting now. Again, these are for more expansive, like almost like solo player campaigns, just one-on-one D&D. And so there's a lot of ways to do this. And I'm in one where I'm running multiple PCs, but that's just because that's the kind of player I am. And in one where I'm the DM in, and I'm guiding one singular PC. So one of the largest issues is PC combat, because there's only one, and that you don't have, typical party composition. There's no healer to heal you when you get injured. There's no caster to help AoE deal with a ton of enemies. There's just that one player. So that makes combat a lot different. And you're normally, unlike usual sessions, you're not going to have action economy in your favor. In fact, it's often going to be against you, which means often you're running more one enemy combats, because at lower levels, a single zombie can be a lot scarier, which means it's almost more of kind of a horror campaign, almost sort of like a gritty realism, where getting hurt is very bad, and it's more about avoiding that. This makes stealth missions very interesting. For one, you don't require that, like, one person who always ends up whiffing their rolls. It's a lot more consistent that way, and easier to run as one person, sneaking around. And also, but if that one person mess up, again, it's all gone. You don't have the group rolls. So one way to do this is have fail safes. Now, this is very important in single player campaigns, because your player is so squishy. I suggest starting them at least 3rd level, maybe 5th, just to have, if you're running, one PC, of course, to have them be able to at least handle combat. And also, because of this, combat is going to be a lot faster. There's not 10 people waiting to take their turns. You're not keeping track of a ton of things. It is just your one player and maybe a few enemies, if maybe even one, which makes combat incredibly quick. I mean, normally combat goes for like maybe 2 hours in my normal sessions. It's done within like 30 minutes or less, to be honest, in solo sessions, which means it's going to be a lot more roleplay based, so be prepared for that prep. Now, in the one where I'm guiding a single player, they're a monk. This makes solo combat very easy because of kind of the style of how a monk works. I try to kind of spice it up at different ways that they would end up fighting one enemies. Like, one's kind of a tournament style, where he's kind of going up the ranks fighting multiple enemies, or sort of this kind of like that one Bruce Lee movie where he kind of goes up each floor and there's a new enemy for him to fight, kind of like that style. Enemies are, he's 5th level, so he can deal with a bunch of weaker enemies as well. And also, I like to do more cinematic combat. So I often do, because it's not like there's a ton to keep track of, it's just you and the enemy, you can add in a lot more complex rules, and it really doesn't change a lot of the actual length of combat at all. For example, I've tried one thing which works a lot for monks because they're so dodgy, is I have them roll for AC. This makes fighting one person a lot more cinematic, because an attack that could normally hit, or attack that might often miss, depending on your or the opponent's AC roll, could dramatically change the context of the game. So it's basically, you subtract 10 from your normal AC. So if your AC would be 16, then you would add a plus 10 bonus to whatever you would roll. Also, I try to give my enemies weaknesses, so if my players are smart about it, and research beforehand, they will find that there is a way to finish this combat relatively easily. Whether it be attacking a specific spot, like maybe they have like a stake in the heart or something, and if you attack the one spot that's going to be harder to hit and drive that in deeper, that's going to deal a ton of damage to them. Or maybe they're weak to a certain type of damage, especially because I gave him this one item that gives him access to a ton of different damage types. So all he has to do is sort of figure out what that weakness is and then exploit it if he's smart about it. And if you're doing cinematic, sort of like a training montage thing where you're kind of fighting that monk master, and they're, trying to see if you're prepared. I just have them describe what they're going to do, and then based off of that, I'll have them make a roll or not. Like, I don't like sweep the leg, that might be a normal attack roll, but with with the opponent falling prone on a failure, or, they might grapple them or something, and I just kind of mess around with it and really make it be more about the sort of immersion of it than the actual damage or mechanics. But in actual combat, I like to make my PC feel more heroic because I don't want them to just die on me. So I implement a homebrew mechanic I made up called the push yourself mechanic, where basically if you want to do something extra during your turn, because the action economy is against you, you can make a constitution check, saving throw basically, to try to do that. If you fail, you can still do it, but you take a level of exhaustion. So, for example, you want to get more movement in your turn to get to the enemy or climb up something. Then push yourself. You want to make an extra attack. That might be harder based off of the difficulty. Like, it might be DC 10 to increase your speed, but it might be DC 15 to make another attack. Also, I sort of do a concentration type thing where you can delay the damage you've taken a turn by rolling over half the damage you took that turn, but you will have to repeat the save on the next turns as it's only been delayed. I also use quick quaffing to allow you to take a potion as a bonus action because they're going to need all the healing they can get. Also, as I mentioned earlier, fail safes. So, if you're in a spy mission or something, if you fail your stealth check, that doesn't mean game over. What it means is, oh, the guards are starting to come over. Next fail, oh, they called some other guards. Now there's a bunch of guards coming at you. Third failure, the guards spot you down the corridor. You can try to run away or something. But either way there's multiple chances you have. It's not instant. Think of that Indiana Jones scene where he grabs onto the vine thing as he's hanging off the ledge after Speedo tossed the Indiana Jones tossed the idol to Speedo, and he raced away, leaving Indiana Jones not have the rope to get across, so he had to leap over. He grabbed another thing, but then it pulled down. That would be his failure. He succeeded the jump, but basically failed the jump, but it pulls down, then he can make another athletics check, try to go up again, and he gets up. It might be good to give the player like a sidekick to fight alongside them, because this helps the action economy. Not taking away the spotlight, but they might use the help action or heal the player or whatever when needed, and if the player's really losing, they can kind of come in and also kind of add buffing. They're very support based. Remember, NPCs, not DMPCs. Your NPCs should not take away the spotlight. They should be there to help the player in combat. This doesn't mean that they suck in combat. They can certainly have combat skills, but they shouldn't make decisions or steal the spotlight, basically. And again, they can have personality. They can have character. Being interesting is different from being the star. It's very interesting as a player to talk to interesting NPCs with their own motivations, but their first allegiance is the player. One way, if you have multiple NPCs, sort of like imagine, the crew of a Star Trek vessel. The captain makes the ultimate decision. You may turn to the science officer and he says, there's an enemy coming over. The science officer said, maybe you want to talk to them first. Then you turn to the security officer and he's like, fire on them. And maybe the medical officer is like, we can't handle them. We should just try to flee and get out of here. These are not telling the player what to do. It's saying, hey, you have options. Here's some of them. But it's up to you, ultimately, to make that decision. Because you want your player to make decisions. Having NPCs at their disposal and not other players, they're going to try to alleviate the decision to them, because decisions mean another opportunity to be wrong. You're missing that fourth pillar of role-playing games, which is argument with other players, trying to plan together, figure something out. You're missing that element. So they're going to try to interact with NPCs like that, but you can't. You have to keep the spotlight on the player and make sure that their sidekick NPC is the players. This means that when it makes decisions, and they're making decisions for it, basically. So if the player really is in an actual jam and for a riddle, and maybe they want to give them a hint, if they've been controlling it the entire time, and you do this right and not too often, the NPC can give a hint, and the player will think, this is my guy, we're working together, this is teamwork, this is, still my idea. Which is basically, it's keeping the player feeling like they're the center of the attention, because this is it's not like a TV show where you have different episodes on different people, and it's all about them as, a group. Instead, it's about this one main character who goes off on a quest. This is a movie. This can allow for more deep role-playing experiences and role-playing gold and stories that you're not going to get sidetracked off of, because there's no arguments with other players. What they want to do, they're going to do. If they want to, this is why backstory and all that is very important, because you want the character to have motivation. And if they're going to follow that, you can just set things up for them to do that, which is great, because then you have this narrative. They have this goal and they're going to achieve it. My solo player's ultimate goal is to kill a god. That's as big as you get, but it's a strong motivation, and they're going to go on an epic quest. I take a lot from sort of Greek here with the weaknesses and these sort of epic quests, just sort of almost like a mythic, and like mythological sort of journey. As I said, it's a lot more role-play centric. Combat is going to take maybe 45 minutes at max, which means that the rest, actually, normally solo sessions tend to be shorter, because it's really hard to just be with someone else, just solo you and them talking for 4 hours straight. It doesn't have the same dynamic for multiple people. So they will be shorter normally, because you guys need that break, but you still have most of the time for the session blocked out for actual role-playing rather than combat, which means as a DM will probably have to prepare more. Combat will be easier, of course, but you have to prepare more in terms of actual story. This isn't a problem for me. I love torturing myself and giving myself extra work for campaigns and such, but just, be ready for that as a DM. Also, again, the attention is all on the player and what they want to do, which gives both an opportunity for the one who loves role-playing games to just play more of them, and the person who doesn't, maybe isn't as involved in bigger sessions, to really have the full attention they deserve. And additionally, like, how often do you get that in anything? To have almost 4 hours of time completely focused on you. That is the beauty of one-on-one D&D. Also, the tone is different. You're not going to have hack and slash dungeons, because your player can't handle that much combat. They're just one person, so it's going to be more stealth, more diplomatic and role-playing based missions and storylines. You're going to have horror and investigation and mystery, rather than, more combat-oriented plot hooks, which is great. It allows for new opportunities and new tones that you wouldn't have otherwise. Now, I mentioned earlier that running multiple players as a that only player is an option. A lot of people I've seen don't recommend this, but I don't know how many people have actually tried this. I mean, when I do it, I enjoy. I'm in one where I'm running multiple players, but this is rare, because it's a lot to keep track of. I mean, it certainly does make combat a lot, me especially, because I find normal combat boring as a DM, because I'm often running at least 5 people and I have to be at attention all times, whereas normally I have to wait maybe 15 minutes to take my turn. So I love not only having my turn more often, but having 4 turns. It's amazing. But it is a lot to keep track of, and roleplay gets kind of weird. Like, I often have the GM run another one of my own characters when they have interactions amongst themselves, which honestly doesn't happen that much. So there has to be, even then, most of like the role play interactions happens with the NPCs, and I sort of have chosen one character that is basically the main character of the story. So there, it is hard to keep track of sometimes. I think for those who are, very into it and are more DMs than players, I certainly don't mind. It makes downtime great though, because they all have those ambitions and everything, but it depends on the person. So talk to your player on how they want to, do their solo session, be involved, a single player, multiple player, how often, um, things like that. And then, but keep in mind, it is very humbling to have to go back from a one-on-one D&D campaign to a normal campaign, from where the intention is all on you to something normal. So just as a player, be wary of that, because you have to take your turn more often when there is other people at the table. But I think there's still, this is why a lot of people enjoy one-on-one D&D. I don't think that it's done enough, because it is great to have that attention still on you and to live that epic movie-like campaign, which is great. I mean, you sweep through sessions too, so as a DM, be prepared a lot, and as a player, be prepared to have a lot of stuff going on. And once again, it's great for both people who haven't played D&D that much, and may not, be more quiet and not really have the spotlight on them, to have that spotlight on them and get the full experience, or for people who just love D&D. And I think everyone should give it a try, if you can. You will. But yes, this is Sean from Deck Dungeon, signing off.